So let me pray really quick, just folks. Father, we just thank you for an opportunity to laugh, to sing, to come together as one family in pursuit of you. We thank you for what you are doing in our lives, and we pray that you continue to pierce us. We praise you. All right, John 17. We've been talking for 3 weeks on our 4th week of Worldview. If you have your Bibles, open to John 17, just for a moment. I'm going to go through a few things. I have a few verses that I want to track down, but this will be like the main one. So put your little sticky note or whatever you need to put there. We're going to come back to this toward the end. But somebody read to me John 17, 1 through 3, please.
After Jesus said this, he looked toward heaven and prayed, Father, thou art Son, glorify your Son, and you come to glorify me. You grant him authority that all people might give eternal life to all those who give it. Now this is eternal life. We know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent.
What type of problems do people cry out to God for? Thanks, General. General specific there. How about let's bring it in? What, like specifically? Health? Okay, good. What else? Money? People cry out to God for money? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, when they want more or they don't have enough? They cry out to God for financial success. Interesting. I can see that. I would say more people cry out to God for financial distress. When they don't have money to pay for something, they cry out to God.
In the song we just had, that he's like, they cry out for financial success, cry out for.
Yeah. What else? Strength.
Peace.
Peace. Yeah. Guidance. Jennifer, you're going to say something? It's not a tip of your tongue. What?
Wisdom for raising our kids.
That's like a daily prayer for like 18 years, right? Strength. How about anybody come out to God for guilt? You feel guilty? Or fear? Or loss? Death? What about relationships? What about addictions? When have you cried out to God? Oh, when did we open? Probably a month ago? 7 weeks ago? Like 3 weeks ago. Gosh, it feels like forever now, right? So, probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago, your parents were here, Aaron, like right before we opened up. And I was giving your parents a second tour, first directly on our living mom and your dad were here. And we were walking through, and we went through the first aisle, and I was pointing out all the different offices, and your mom made a comment to me. I don't know if she made it to me, she just made it out loud. She said, there's a lot of counseling offices here. I was like, yeah, there is a lot of counseling offices. We have four counseling offices for 3 LPCs, real deal licensed professional counselors. We have 3 PLPCs that are almost there. We have 3 interns. Like, we have a lot of counselors doing a lot of counseling here at this building. And as I was thinking about that, like, she made that comment, and it stayed with me, and I thought about it for like days on end. And a few weeks later, I was reminded of an old talk that I listened to by Simon Sinek, who was talking about the millennial generation. And just a few days ago, I read an article about the millennial generation and the Generation Z, which was a fascinating article because it talked about, first it was stating that it was the millennials, but then new research showed that it's also the Generation Z that is the loneliest generations that we have today. 30 or 25 to 30% of millennials and Gen Z say they have no connection, no relationship with anybody. And as I was researching this, and I wasn't necessarily purposely some research, but I was drawn to it. I was trying to figure out, this is kind of like a problem. This is like maybe an issue that we should be thinking about. And so I continued to read and continued to look at a few different things. And it brought me back to, like I said, Simon Sinek, who was, said some things probably about 5-6 years ago. And I sent it to my family. I said, this was almost prophetic, what he was saying 6-7 years ago. And I watched it again. He was saying that the employers were having struggles with millennials because there's these millennials that are coming in. And now I see that it's connected to Gen Zs too. And the biggest complaint that employers were having was that these millennials, they seem to have an attitude of entitlement, narcissism, this self-interested mentality, unfocused, even lazy mentality. And so he was trying to talk about why some of these issues are the way that they are. And a lot of it had to do with, he broke it down into 4 things, but I wanted to just focus on a couple that he talked about. His reasoning, one, was that the reason that millennials and Gen Z struggle so much, the first problem was because of failed parenting. That was his words that he got from another study that he learned. Failed parenting strategies. A lot of these kids were raised and brought up thinking they could do whatever they wanted to do. They could be whatever they wanted to be. They could win even when they didn't win, right? Because everybody got a participation award, right? No matter what, you always get something from this. And he said science has shown over and over that this, especially participation award, just devalues the self-esteem of people because you come in last place and you get an award and you know you don't deserve the award, but you get an award anyway. And it actually makes the person who gets the award feel embarrassed because they know they didn't earn this. And so these generations, because of a lot of these parenting strategies, have kind of created a lower self-esteem than previous generations. He said another issue that we struggle with today is social media. He said social media, biologically, is an issue. Not mentally or psychologically, but biologically is an issue. Because social media taps into something in your biology that creates dopamine. You guys know what dopamine is? It's the chemical that does what? What? Makes you happy, makes you feel good. Like, woo, these are great, right? And every time that we do something fun or experience something good, we get a bit of dopamine. And it's not actually that we experience it, it's the anticipation of what we're going to experience that's good. We get dopamine. And so when you're feeling bad, like it's a crummy day, a lot of people will send out like 10 text messages, hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? How you doing? And then what happens? You get ding, right? Oh, see, people are responding to me, right? And so every time I get a ding on my phone, I get a little hit of dopamine. I get a little hit of, oh, things are going well. Or like I post something on Facebook, and I turn my alert on, and every time somebody like button, you like, oh, somebody like my post, and they like my pictures, and they like this. And so there's this issue with social media that every time I get this thing, it creates this dopamine hit for me. And the problem with this is dopamine is a really good thing, but dopamine is also an addictive chemical. It's what you get when you smoke, when you gamble, when you drink. Dopamine is a good thing. Too much dopamine is a bad thing. It's an addictive thing. We actually have restrictions on gambling, smoking, drinking. What restrictions do we have on social media? None. Also, studies have shown, this was fascinating, this was like recent within the last year, studies have shown that people spend 3 to 5 hours daily scrolling. 3 to 5, that's 3 to 5 hours a day. 3 hours a day scrolling. That's 21 hours to 35 hours a week. That's a part-time job. For some, that's a full-time job in today's generations, right? Just scrolling through your phone. And he was saying that this is one of the causes, this article, this other study was reading, this is one of the causes of loneliness. The thing that is supposed to connect us to other people actually keeps us from deep connection, which is really what people need in real life. We think we're connected media, but in all reality, what we genuinely need psychologically, emotionally, is to have a real conversation with somebody. To have this real conversation that sometimes is awkward. You know, I feel terrible for the younger generations growing up, because they have no idea how to have conversations of real things. Their relationships are based on Facebook or Instagram or what is it? What? Snapchat, right? Give me your Snapchat, Megan. And so we have this conversation. But when we were growing up, right? If I wanted to date a girl, I had like, hey, girl, what's your name? You know, like this awkward feeling, right? For today's generation, it's like you get on a website, yeah, Worldview, I'm stud, right? Let's go. I don't need anything.
It is role playing game.
Yeah, right? I mean, we miss this awkwardness, but it's in this awkwardness that we have deep, real connections with people. And we're living in a society today that does not have that connection. We're struggling. We have two generations that are struggling with connection, struggling with anxiety, with stress, with depression, infidelity, and suicide. We live in a world where people are crying out for help, to be rescued, to be saved. Now, we've been talking about the Western view versus the Eastern view, the biblical worldview. In the Western Greek worldview of the Bible, of the church, when people talk about salvation, what do we typically think of? Going to heaven, right? When I typically think of being saved and being rescued, I think of the afterlife. One day I'll be able to get out of this place and into heaven, and I'll not go to hell when I'm dead. I won't have to worry about that. Saved so that I can have this wonderful life after I die. But is this the biblical worldview? Is this the Eastern perspective of the Bible? Is this what the people who lived this and wrote this and heard these words, is this how they understood salvation? How would they have understood it otherwise? It's very similar to if you ask a Jewish man today, hey, are you saved? What does the Jewish man say? Am I in danger? There's something about to hit me? It's a totally different perspective from our Western thinking. Think of Exodus. When the people cried out to God, what were they crying for?
Rescue.
To be saved, to be rescued. So to die or to live? To live, to be rescued from the hell that they were living in. Everybody turn to Psalm 3. Psalm chapter 3, verses 1 to 8. There's a which you just read, right? Psalm 3. You read Psalm 4. Psalm 3 today. We read it last week. Oh Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no deliverance for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the one who lifts my head. I was crying to the Lord with my voice, and he answered me from his holy mountain. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustains me. I will not be afraid of men, thousands of people. I will not be afraid of 10,000 of people. We who have set themselves against me round about. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For you have smitten all my enemies on the cheek. You have shattered the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be upon your people. Israel, verse 7. Arise, O Lord, save me. The Hebrew word for save is the word yeshah. Yeshah is save. It's also the root word for verse 8, which says salvation belongs to the Lord. It's the root word for Yeshua. Yeshua, that's Yeshua. Have you heard that name before? Right? Yeshua. Jesus' actual name is Yeshua in Hebrew. His name means what? Salvation. Which is an interesting thing because when Matthew, or the author of Matthew, whoever it was writing about this birth story and all of the things that are about to happen, he wrote this passage. He said, "She, Mary, will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people." But in Hebrew, in English, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but in Hebrew, it makes total sense because it's a wordplay, which is all about Hebrew writers, right? It's all about these idioms and wordplays and words like poetry. And so, you shall call his name salvation, because he will Yeshua, his people. Yeshua will Yeshua, his people. So let's go back to John 17. John 17, verses 1 through 3 again. What is salvation? Is it that one day we will get to heaven? Is it that one day we will, there's all kinds of things that I've heard that talks about that. Have you not seen movies, read books, talked to people? You know, the joke of, who's waiting for you at the gates? Who's waiting for you at the gates? St. Peter, right? Just to check your credentials. Can you get in? Right? There's all kinds of this imagery and these ideas, all these things. Like, one day we'll get to float on clouds, maybe with wings. There's all of these ideas and poetry and art that's out there trying to, what is heaven going to be like? But my question is this what our hope is? Is our hope that one day that we will be saved and get to float in the clouds? Now, I'm not saying that I don't believe in some kind of afterlife, because I do. Whether that be a resurrection of the dead, there's just not enough in this that tells us anything about afterlife. But my question isn't necessarily about when we die. My question is about today. What saves people from the hell that they're living in today?
There was a, I don't know who it was, I read it, somebody came up with a unique concept, and that was that eternal life meant inheriting generations. So I imagine that, like when I had children, and the rewards you get in children on that line. That's what biblical eternal life is.
Sure. I think I've read something similar to that. Which kind of plays into this idea. What is eternal life? Is it floating on the clouds? Is it mansions? Is it playing golf every day? Is it lots of crowns and treasures that you earn? What does verse 3 say? Aaron, can you read that?
This is eternal life, to know you, only true God, Jesus Christ, who you have sent.
That they know. They know the one true God and his Messiah. Eternal life is to know God. Yeshua. The Greek in this word is gnosko. It is an interesting word that John chooses because it's not the typical word to know, which is like the idea of knowledge. I know this stuff, right? He chooses a verb of present continuous action. But John's not thinking in Greek. He's not writing in Greek. I think he was translated later. This would have been in Hebrew. So what would the Hebrew word been? It would have been Yada. Right? If anybody seen Seinfeld, right? Yada, yada, yada. Actually, I was going to play a clip, but they actually really used it in its actual sense. So I couldn't because this is a PG-13, right? They put it on there and it's like yada, yada, yada. It's like that was exactly what the word means in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the word means to fully embrace an intimate companion. Ayada, my wife. The word means the fullness of what that intimate expression is. I'm married to my wife because of Yada, not because of a piece of paper that says we're married. It's about a connection physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Eternal life, salvation, is an intimate relationship with God through salvation, through Yeshua, which brings us to the Father, which is very, very interesting, very rabbinic. See, when we hear that in the West, we think, well, we have to have Jesus in our heart, and that's what leads us to heaven. But in a Western, or I'm sorry, an Eastern perspective, of the Jewish perspective, if John is writing about his rabbi, his Messiah, his teacher, then what that means is the way that I get to God is through the person who is teaching me how to live in connection with God. And for John, nobody was connected to God more than Yeshua was. Yeshua's connection with God was so much and so great that he had authority. God had given him all authority. That he was the son. That he was divine. He was the king. So how do I get to God? Just like every other Jewish rabbi taught. You follow your rabbi. You follow your king. You follow the one who brings you to God. It's through this type of relationship that we are saved. It's not saying a prayer of salvation. It's not, I accept Jesus into my heart. It's not because I know the 4 spiritual laws. It's not because I agree with the creeds of the church. It's because of Yada. It's because of this intimate relationship that I have with God, that I can be saved today. That I can find healing and peace and comfort today. That I can live without fear and anxiety today. That I can be rescued and redeemed today.
Amen. With the understanding of how the churches today, how to conduct, salvation calls and so forth and so on, and everything. Where in Romans chapter 3, it comes to believe in your heart, and you confess with your mouth. So, to begin, in the beginning walk, in this term, us who are not Jews, not right? So it's just okay. For us to come to a place where we hear, come to a service or whatever, and you hear this about God's word and anything that helps you to say, and you come and you acknowledge Him, and you say, you believe that, okay? I believe Jesus is Father, Son, and I want to follow Him. And so you say that, with the truth of your heart, you believe in that, right? So I always, when you do this, it's like becoming the Son. By saying, I want you to be my Lord and Savior. Not just my Savior, but be my Lord. At that moment, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, and that's exactly the Greek mentality we have. It's a step-by-step process. When we think about this, it's a step-by-step process. And I want to ask you a question. Really think about this. Nobody did that process better than Billy Graham. How many people did Billy Graham save? I think I wrote about this in my book. It was like in the hundreds of thousands. How'd that work out? Because here's the problem. In a Greek perspective, if I say the words, if I know what to say, like I said, if I say these things, then I'll be saved. But that's not what you not. That's not, and I know you're thinking of it as a step-by-step process.
I'm talking about for us, right?
This group?
I'm talking about the Gentiles.
Okay.
To be able to come into, right, the family of God. First, we need to acknowledge. And I know we say step by step, and I can see like it's just for explanation wise, but it happens, that it's believe. And here's the thing, if we want to say about Billy Graham, what do we say about Jesus? When Jesus said, hey, I'm the Son of God, and you must hear me, and they said they left by thousands. This is what I'm saying. So I don't think it's fair to judge something like that, but then what I'm saying is, so my point of conversation is, absolutely to know. It's like my first, not
But I think that you're thinking, and look, I don't want to get sidetracked way too much, but I want you to think about to know, like, from a Greek perspective, to know is to think mentally. But yada doesn't mean that.
No, I'm talking
Yada is about an intimate relationship that you have with your wife, right? In all levels.
Right.
That's what this is saying. Eternal life is to know God, not to be able to acknowledge mentally that I agree with these things.
Correct.
It is an experiential thing that you can feel.
Yes. What I'm saying is, believe in your heart. So that your inmost being, right? Believe. Okay? And the saying is corresponding action to your belief, right? Okay? Then it's the believing where we come into the action. We feel the call before we walk. So the thing is, there's entrance into the sheepfold, right? It comes through. You shall believe Yeshua. And he even says that, listen, anybody who calls on my name, right? Okay? They'll be saved. So do I think that they're going to live? We talk about living like every day? No. But do believe at that moment in time, right? Call upon him, and that's calling him to believe who he is. He said he wouldn't deny him of that.
Yeah, I'm not tracking with how that's connected with what we're talking about. We can talk about this later, because I don't think it's connected. We're talking about the same thing. I think we're talking about two different things. We have finished this. But I want to go back to the idea of the dot, like this intimate connection, this feeling that you have. There was a night that we watched a movie as a family, and there was a couple scary parts. It was years ago, and I remember when you were here, so you came to the room, right? And you were really maybe 7, 8 years old, and you couldn't sleep. Like, you were afraid to go to your room. You were already in bed. You came to our room. You're like, I'm afraid. Like, if you're a parent, you've probably experienced this before, right? And you came to the room. You're like, I'm just afraid. I don't know why I'm afraid. I can't sleep. So I grabbed you. I threw you in the middle of the bed, and I just put my hand on his back. And within seconds, he was asleep. It was just that presence, that closeness, that touch, that he could feel secure. Because he knew I was there, because he could feel that I was there, that we were in close proximity to him, that he could no longer be afraid. That all that anxiety, all that worry, all that stress, all that fear was gone now. Because he could feel that touch. I think sometimes we have to be what Yeshua says. Matthew records these words. He says, at that time, the taught ones came to Yeshua saying, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Yeshua called a little child and set him in their midst. He said, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become as little children, you shall by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself as a little child is the greatest in the kingdom. Sometimes we have to be reminded that we need to humble ourselves. That we too are still children of our Father. And when we feel scared, when we feel confused, when we feel anxiety, stress, and unsure of our direction, is only through Yada, the touch, that we feel hope, healing, peace, and wholeness. As I thought about the beginning of this conversation, for those people who are struggling with anxiety, depression, confusion, who struggle with no purpose, I wonder if that's because there was a lack of Yada. There was a lack of knowing God personally. It begins sometimes with Yeshua bringing us to. Which is exactly what his brother said, James. Didn't he say, come near to God, and he will come near to you? It's through this purpose. Yes.
So is it necessary to know Jesus to know God?
That is a conversation afterwards. That is a
I mean, I think that if you turn back just a couple chapters in 14, Jesus is talking, and he says, he's talking to his disciples, and he says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. And Philip, but will show us, and he has a conversation about him. Don't you know the Father? You know me, right? And further on, he says, if you love me and keep my commandments, I'll ask the Father, and he'll give you another advocate, the Spirit, right? So I think that there's what?
I'm laughing because I just heard a lecture from the middle school of ministers, and you had the same question in the dialogue with Skip. I'll have to send it to you because it's the same Greek question that you asked me, and when we were teaching from a biblical perspective.
No, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's a hard concept for us. But I think that Jesus says it right here.
But I think
You will know the Father because he is the Son of the Father. He is, like you were saying,
right, and from an Eastern perspective, from a rabbinic perspective, that's exactly right. You come following Rabbi, and he brings you to God. And that's exactly what. But that's not answering his question. He had a different question.
Not really.
And we can.
This personal experience in my life, Catholicism, Jesus. But I don't think I really connected until I kind of connected directly with God. And maybe Jesus brought me there, because I know Jesus, okay? Because that's my whole life. So I debate that in my mind. What really got me to be God? I don't know that Jesus got me to be God.
And here's the thing. I don't think there is one specific way to get God.
Right.
Because each one of us in this room is different. Right? That's the Western perspective. We got to follow this prescribed one step after another step after another. But from an Eastern perspective, it's not a step-by-step process. Everything is connected. So what connected you might not connect me. What connected Rustin might not connect Wes. But that doesn't mean that we can't be connected with God in our own ways. Globally.
Which means under that understanding, I agree with 100%, is there a strict guideline, Greek rule that says if you don't do this, you can't do that, or you can't do that.
That's a Greek rule.
That's Greek. That's
Right. In the Greek perspective, there's a step-by-step process. You have to say this prayer, you have to believe in your heart, you have to accept Jesus in your blah, blah, blah. You have to go to Mass every day, otherwise you're going to hell. Right? That is not this.
God saved me before I knew either one of them.
I didn't understand you.
I said, God saved me before I knew either one of them in reality.
Right.
But Matt,
Oh.
to me, there's at different stages of life, you have much different connections.
Yeah.
Because of where your mindset is.
Every day sometimes. Yeah.
So
The season. Absolutely.
Jesus never
Now you're thinking Easter. Now you're thinking like these guys. Right? Because in the Western view, it is black and white. But in reality, life is gray. It's messy. It's hard. It's like marriage. It's like raising kids. It is not easy.
Hey, let's not argue.
But God will sustain you. We get that word.
Which is why James says, come near to God. Because we need that. When everything's falling apart, we have to remember, I need to go back to the one who loves me. I need to go back to the one who can sustain me. I need to go back to the one who can, somebody said, who can give me wisdom. I need to go back to the one who can bring healing to my brokenness right now. We all need that. And the most important thing about this is the idea of what is to know God. It's not black and white. It's red. But it is the most sustaining thing that we need I know you love when I put you on the spot, but I think it's perfect.
Thank you, Father, for the scriptures and verses. And thank you for the questions. And thank you for the God that we will all this, you know, we believe with the answer. That everything is perfect. Figure out, you know, the faces today, tomorrow, Tuesday, or how all of you. And thankful for people that are able to come together. Thank you for hearing our prayers, our souls, and our thoughts today.